Abraham, you've told me a story in the past, and we'd like to record it for history. This is important. Can you tell us about the day you were at the White House and a black limousine pulled up?
Yeah, Bill, this is very sensitive information that I have held back for many years. But while I was the first African American on the White House detail, and this happened in June of 1961, I had been on the detail approximately 2 weeks. I was on the 4 to 12 shift. About 5:30 in the evening, a black limousine pulled up in front of the White House door. Many of the agents who were on my shift had gone to lunch and left about 2 agents to guard the White House. Now, this was the usual practice of the agents on the Secret Service. And that was one of the faults I found out that I didn't like while I was on the detail, is that many times the agents would vacate the White House and then they would go out and have fun, drinking, and they would come back later in a condition which they could not protect the President of the United States. But the agents, thinking that probably the President had gone upstairs to his room, living quarters, had gone out and taken a long lunch. Black limousine pulled up in front of the White House, and President Johnson got out of the back of the limousine. He slammed the door with all his might. He came trumping through the White House. I was sitting in the Secret Service office when he came through. So I followed President Johnson to the Oval Office. I stood outside the Oval Office because I could see that that post was not being covered. There was a lot of yelling and hollering and screaming. Between Bobby Kennedy, I recognized Bobby Kennedy's voice. I recognized Johnson's voice. And Johnson was being very vulgar. I also recognized the President's voice. And there was no question about it. There was a political argument that was going on. There's a lot of cursing being done by President Johnson. And every now and then I could make out a word or two. And they were talking about the coming election. After about 5 minutes in the office, 5 to 10 minutes, Johnson came storming out of the office. Left the office door open, and I looked inside. I saw Robert Kennedy and President Kennedy standing up talking and somewhat smiling at each other. Johnson stumped out of the office, and before he exited the office completely, he turned around and told President Kennedy, "You better stop fucking with me, you son of a bitch. Gonna get enough of fucking with me." And I was shocked because I took that as a threat to the President. It was a subtle threat, but I took it as a threat to the President. So when the leader of my ship, who was too stout at the time, came back from lunch, I mentioned to him that President Johnson had visited the White House. And I told him that there had been an angry conversation between the President and President Johnson. As I recall now, Stu Stout told me not to worry about that. It happens occasionally. Now, Johnson looked around and saw me as I was standing by the door, and he asked some person who was, I guess, the White House personnel, "Who is that Negro standing there?" Said, "Oh, he's a Secret Service agent." And Johnson left. I followed Johnson to the front of the White House door. He got back into the same limousine. the limousine pulled off. Now, I swear by my mother's grave that this happened. This is the truth to the best of my ability. And if it were possible that I could recall the date, it was in mid-June of 1961, about 5:30 in the afternoon. And that's what I recall to the best of my ability.